Good evening, everyone. My name is David Sidwick. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset. Thanks for joining us this evening. The theme of this event is shoplifting. We know at this time of year in particular, the high streets are busy, our shops are busy. And this is a heinous crime which affects not only the people in the shop staff, but also our communities generally. And so tonight we're going to talk about the different ways this is being tackled by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, by Dorset Police, and also through partnership working. The objective is to raise awareness of the work currently being done and to encourage greater confidence, particularly around issues such as reporting. It's being held online to encourage the greatest participation as possible for as many people as possible. And I'm joined by the Assistant Chief Constable Mark Callahan from Dorset Police and also Chief Inspector Alyssa Forrest. We each have a couple of minutes to talk about certain things which will be useful around the issue of shoplifting. From my perspective, I first became aware of this long ago as a candidate when I was actually party to a shoplifting happening in my local co-op. And when I came into office, I wanted to build something which would address this issue. And so we started something called the Dorset Safer Business Partnership to build a closer relationship between businesses and Dorset Police. It meets quarterly. It has Dorset Police on it and local business lead representatives, as well as my office. And it addresses four things. It looks at how to improve crime reporting. It looks about how to get better engagement and visibility from the police around this offence. It looks about crime prevention. What are we doing in order to actually prevent this in the first place? And the fourth thing, which isn't relevant for tonight, is fraud for businesses. That started, it built partnerships. It also helped facilitate other things, such as business crime reduction partnerships. We've got two of those, one in Weymouth and the other in Bournemouth and Poole. These were started by the business improvement districts working together and collaborating, and they make a real difference. So I'm going to stop now and actually move and allow Dorset Police to show what they've been doing in order to address this awful crime in our communities. Assistant Chief Constable Callahan, would you like to start off?
Yes, evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks, David, and thanks for the introduction. So part of my portfolio is around local policing, crime and criminal justice, and strategic partnerships. And obviously, I just want to spend just a few moments before I bring Alyssa in, who will talk about how we manage the shoplifting crimes and investigate them. Just talk a few minutes about some of the national, local, and regional sort of approaches to shoplifting. So if I start off nationally, I think the first thing is there's nationally there's an understanding and a commitment to tackling serious acquisitive crime, and large-scale shoplifting, organised shoplifting is a key part of that. And there's a Operation Opal, and Opal works with law enforcement officers, partners, and industries, both nationally and internationally, leading on intelligence functions and coordinating the approaches to tackling serious and organised crime, serious and organised acquisitive crime. Now, that acquisitive crime is part of that retail crime, and particularly the organised side of that. And of course, we understand that acquisitive crime has a considerable impact on victims, and that team focus on these high volume, tangible crimes to reduce the direct harm to the public. In addition to that, there's a project called Project Pegasus, which is linked to it. And Pegasus is about a business and policing partnership that was launched in October 2023. And this is to radically improve the way retailers are able to share intelligence with policing, to better understand the tactics used by organised retail crime gangs. And I am happy to say organised retail gangs in Dorset are a very, very low in number, although we do have some travelling criminality that comes into certain areas. We don't see significant organised retail crime gangs like you do in other areas of the UK and bigger cities. But nonetheless, we share information, we understand where they're may be moving between police forces and counties, so that we can support the priority of tackling this rise in shoplifting and ultimately catching more offenders. And if I just talk briefly, that's a national programme that we're all linked in Dorset. But if I talk then just locally about some of the work that we do. So first of all, our neighbourhood teams focus on repeat victimisation, repeat offenders and repeat locations. So our neighbourhoods are really key in making sure that we're tackling the criminality. And that isn't always about arresting people and putting them before the courts. That can be about tackling the other causes, antisocial behaviour, by using dispersal notice, carrying out stop and searches, and dealing with matters in other ways in order to try and prevent the criminality. And one example of that is Operation Spotter, particularly in Bournemouth, where we've really focused on the impact of prolific shoplifting, antisocial behaviour, and targeted work with plainclothes officers and our neighbourhood teams, and making sure we're trying to tackle some of the root causes, as well as catching those offenders who are committing offences. So that's a very brief overview for me. I'm going to pass to Alyssa, so that we can then, Alyssa can talk about your work, Alyssa, and then we can get into the questions, which is probably one of the most important things this evening.
Yes, and I'd also encourage everybody to put questions into us. We really want to make this as interactive as possible. Over to you, Alyssa.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and good evening to everyone. So I'm the Chief Inspector for the Incident Resolution Centre. This is the IRC in Dorset Police, and this department deals with desk-based investigations. So just to explain the process, what this means is when a retail theft or shoplifting has taken place and the offender's left the scene, the victim will inform police, will then send out a shoplifting pack, and the CCTV and statement will be sent back to us. When this is returned, this goes to a dedicated retail team to progress the investigation within the IRC. So of note, 65% of Dorset's reported shoplifts are dealt with by this department in this way. Now, Shopkeeper is delivered by the IRC, and this is a robust whole system approach that seeks long-term prevention by presenting the whole nature of offending to the courts. So rather than presenting offences piecemeal and not getting the true flavour of what's going on, we really bring everything together in one place, and we work closely with the courts and the CPS to do this. So long-term preventions achieved through remands, bail conditions, community orders, and custodial sentences. So the IRC operates across the whole of Dorset, and that lets us look at the evidence base of offending. And it's really clear that there's a small core of prolific offenders that are causing a large amount of harm in our communities. These individuals are identified and escalated to be an Shopkeeper target. So the retail team is skilled at identifying trends, hotspots, and targeting offenders. And as I said, this is across the whole of Dorset. And key to this operating is the reporting. We need to know what's going on so we can target these individuals causing the harm in the community. So just some headlines around, thank you. Yes, can I have the next slide, please? Just some headlines around Shopkeeper. And I just want to start by dispelling the myth that if you don't see a police officer physically attend in that store, nothing's going to happen. Far from it, that is not the case. Shopkeeper has been operating since November, and we've been providing that enhanced focus on retail crime, targeting prolific offenders. We've targeted 32 offenders and achieved 696 positive outcomes for our victims of crime. So the retail team is consistently performing high. During the summer, we achieved a positive outcome rate of 61% in June, 65% in July, 76% in August, and just last month it was 77%. And what this means is if you give me 10 crimes, I'll give you a positive outcome on just under 8 of them. So it's really important to deal with these people. We need those reports to come in. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So Shopkeeper is achieving greater sentences by, as I said, presenting that whole picture of offending. And across our 32 individuals we've targeted, we've obtained 12 years and 10 months in custodial sentences. 3 individuals, so 10% of our targets, receive a custodial sentence of over 2 years. This is really strong sentencing for shoplifting. It's something I'm really proud of. Also, across our 32 individuals, 29 years have been granted in community behaviour orders and restraining orders, giving that long-term protection to victims of crime. I'll just very briefly touch on a case study. So we had a situation where we were contacted by a number of shops and they're being targeted by 3 individuals. They were stealing on a daily basis and prolific, to the extent they were saying, we'll be back in an hour. My team worked on these individuals and we charged them with 145 offences. Between the 3 of them, they were sentenced to 6 years and 7 months in prison. And across the 3 of them, they got 11 years in restraining orders not to attend Co-op, Tesco's and One Stop across the whole of Dorset, which is a really impressive restraining order. So I've set out what my department does. I've talked about Shopkeeper, and I think it's really clear. My ask is report crimes to us, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. So we've had some questions which were sent in advance. The first one, I think this is probably for you, Alyssa, is, are thefts from couriers and delivery vans included in Dorset crime statistics?
Yes, they are.
Brilliant. That was simple. This one I think might be to Mark. Do Dorset Police attend every report of shoplifters detained? Why are shoplifters not arrested in every case?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think where shoplifters are detained, what calls come into the control room and they're prioritised based on threat, risk and harm. Whereas shoplifters detained at the scene, then we look to deploy officers to those incidents, and they'll obviously deal with them. When they're at those incidents, sometimes arrest might not be the best course of action there and then. There's many factors that come into play. So they may be arrested, but there are other ways in which we can deal with offenders as well. Often what happens is we have to satisfy the criteria to arrest and take into custody. Sometimes those criteria may not be met under those circumstances, so we deal with them what's called a voluntary interview. So they still go through the criminal justice system, they still get dealt with, and ultimately, but it's just a different routing through how they dealt with. The majority of offenders at the scene who are detained, depending on their circumstances, would be arrested. But an example where we may not is where it's a youth, a child offender. It would be inappropriate under certain circumstances to take them into custody. So we'd always be looking about what's the root cause of this offending. So if it's a child, are there wider safeguarding issues that we need to consider in the family home, as an example? But of course, where the offender makes off from the scene and there's no violence or serious harm, serious damage, etc., that's taken place, often that's where we won't deploy officers because they've made away from the scene. But that doesn't mean the investigation doesn't take place. That's what Alyssa's just talked to in terms of her team. When it's reported, we'll then continue the investigation. And often one of our biggest lines of inquiry is CCTV images.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Question 3. What are Dorset Police doing about the shoplifting in Sherborne, where staff members are too scared to approach offenders? Alyssa, do you want to take that one?
Thank you for that question. We are aware of what's going on in Sherborne. This has been raised as a priority this week. MPT are currently working on this matter, supporting the shops, and also my team, the IRC, is reviewing all crimes to give further support.
Thank you for that. I think possibly I should add a comment here. I met with the representatives of retail chains recently in order to talk about things like policies and how better partnership could be achieved with the police. So this piece in the question about staff members are too scared to approach offenders, generally the policy is from the retail chains to encourage their staff not to approach offenders. So I think possibly there is that element in there as well from that point of view. The fourth is really a comment, but I think we should respond to it. The comment goes like this: people know the limits of what they can get away with. The police seem completely ineffective and it's costing honest jobs. And then the last piece I don't have on here. How would you respond to that from the point of view of the piece about completely ineffective?
So if I talk first, and Alyssa, feel free to come in as well. So I think the perception perhaps is being ineffective. I think Alyssa's just commented there about the number of offenders that we've taken through the criminal justice system, in order to make sure we bring offenders to justice. I think what some of the complexities around ineffectiveness is actually many of these offenders have got complex needs. Many are addicted to drugs, alcohol, etc. So some of this is about how do we get to understand the root cause of what's causing them. So yes, some can be poverty, some can be organised crime, some can be drugs and alcohol related as to why they're stealing. So whilst we are proactively, and we really focus on neighbourhood teams, focus on repeat victims, repeat offenders, those prolific offenders, and we're proactively investigating and doing the policing job, often we need it's a coherent approach with all our partners through the criminal justice system to make sure that they're getting the sentences, but also getting the rehabilitation that they may need, or we're dealing with the collective problems that they have. So I don't think we're ineffective. I think we work in a very challenging social environment, which means some individuals, even though they might be arrested and put before the courts, it might not stop their offending because of their circumstances. Our job is to try and understand why that is, bring them to justice, and work with partners to ensure that we can try and prevent that offending going forward. But Alyssa, I don't think anything else you want to add to that.
I think I'll just add, sir, that we're working really hard to publicise our sentences, just to make people aware that we are acting and we are really proactive in what we're doing.
Yes, I think that's the point of tonight, really, is to show that actually there is a lot happening, and the people who are perpetrating the offences are being brought to book, as you demonstrated earlier, Alyssa. So thank you for that question. Have we got more questions? Great question, Charlotte. Really good one. What do you find to be the biggest challenge in tackling shoplifting? I think what I'll do is I'll go to Alyssa first with this one, from the point of view of the tactical approach, and then I'll come to you, Mark, for an overview. Alyssa.
Thank you, Commissioner. So from my point of view, it's something that I've been talking about for the last 6 months, and I would love to see an uplift in reporting from the county. So that's areas outside of BCP. So about 6 months I've been asking. So that's my biggest challenge that I will keep talking about and keep asking for.
Okay. Mark, what's your feeling on this one?
So I think one of our challenges, I think, has been reporting, and still remains a challenge for us. Actually, making sure the trust and confidence of our communities, that actually they trust us, that they can report, and we will investigate. And that's Alyssa's very, very point about that. We need, just like we've done in previous sessions like this, we need the public to report to us, but we also need intelligence. There'll be communities out there who know who these offenders are. So when people steal large quantities of meat or high value products, they'll go into the local pubs and they'll be selling them. And the communities are buying these products off offenders potentially. So actually the community will know who's committing these offences. And we don't just need reporting, but we need intelligence from people, so people can tell us actually who are these prolific offenders, so we can target them, so they stop targeting the stores, etc. And I think the other one is really, one of our biggest challenges, what we're working on, is how we can make reporting more efficient for businesses. And I know, Commissioner, that's something very close to your heart, and you're holding to account for. But actually, how can we reduce the delays in terms of the reporting, us getting the information back out, and then getting the CCTV back in? And we are working on technological solutions to be able to improve that, which I'm hoping will come in 2025, but still work to be done on it. I think if we can deal with those, that means businesses find a more streamlined way to report to us as well, so we can remove some of those blockers.
Thank you for that, Mark. You talked about the reselling in pubs, etc. I presume that if there were retail outfits who were reselling stolen goods, you'd be looking into that as well. Would I be right?
Absolutely. So anybody who purchases stolen goods or somebody is handling stolen goods, it's a criminal offence. So I think a lot of the things is people who might be I'm being very generalistic. I'm not saying it is pubs, but basically people steal, they go and sell to certain people who obviously then go and purchase them, and that's the funding of the financial wheel of it. If we find anybody who's taking stolen goods in from a retail perspective, and the company is therefore committing criminal offences, of course, we'll be proactively targeting those. And of course, there we also have our support with trading standards, licensing, etc., that we can fall on to bring those people to book, to use that expression. So they're the main things. But I think also what's really important is we work really closely with many of our business communities where maybe things are stolen, usually cash generator type shops and online selling of things as well. So we have really good relationships with businesses as well who want to stamp out and fight this type of crime.
Absolutely. Can I have the next question? This is from Susie Lee Bloss. What's the feedback on Operation Shopkeeper from local businesses? What would you like to see from the business community to help the police? Well, look, I think this one's for Alyssa. You've given one ask. What's the feedback from local businesses on it?
Thank you, Susie. So the feedback's been really positive. I'm in regular contact with the BIDS, Safer Business Partnership Board. It's very, very positive. So what would I like to see from the business community to help? So I think overall I'd love to see, and I know I understand the environment you operate in. I know that, staff have got their responsibilities to undertake. My ask would be, what I'd love to see is that you don't hold on to shoplifts, so we don't get a report of 5 coming in at once. Is that when that incident happens, please try and report it to us that day so we can start trying to identify that individual and stop that individual. What I do tend to see a little bit of is people have a shoplift, it gets put on the desk, and then in a week's time it comes into us and they've committed a whole load of other offences that we could have stopped them sometime earlier. So that's, I think, my ask is we don't hoard anything, we give it straight over.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Mark?
No, I think Alyssa's covered off. I think the other things that I've already referred to about that intelligence, that information, and I think the key thing is this is with the business communities, this is a partnership, and actually we want to hear feedback, and we want to help each other try and prevent crime and catch offenders. So I think it's important we have that two-way flow of information, and these events are helpful. We do other things like surveys and engagement through our neighbourhood teams to understand what is working, what isn't working. I think sometimes the public get frustrated because they might give us intelligence, but we can't really then feed back updates on every piece of intelligence. So our engagement through our neighbourhood teams, through Dorset Alert, through all our contacts and engagement is the best way for people to sort of see some of those updates. And I know Alyssa and our media team, we put out on social media when we're actually catching offenders, or with lots of footage goes out of offenders in terms of when we can't identify them through other policing means. And I think those other policing means, whilst we can't go into the operational sort of tactical detail here, it'd be inappropriate. We have a number of ways in which we identify people from CCTV footage. That is very, very fruitful as we step forwards.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So a question from Jade Starmer. What are we doing to tackle or identify and monitor repeat offenders? Well, I think that one's in your bailiwick again, Alyssa.
Thank you very much. So Jade, the IRC operates across the whole of Dorset, so that puts us in a real great position to identify repeat offenders. But what I will say is once we've identified them and we've dealt with them via maybe Shopkeeper, that information is retained. So once they're dealt with, they're still flagged as Shopkeeper. And if they offend again, they've usually got a community order or some order in place, which then makes the sanction higher the next time they're in front of the courts.
Okay, what about identification of a prolific shoplifter? What makes them prolific?
So the prolific status would be how often they are offending within a time frame.
Okay.
For Shopkeeper, we say if we have a report of over 5 offences within a couple of months, that would show they're prolific.
Okay, thank you for that. Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to come in just to sort of some additional context. The other aspect that we have what's called integrated offender management teams, because some of our prolific shoplifter offences do other serious acquisitive crime as well. So often what we'll do is if they're a higher level of offending, so they might commit burglaries as well, for example, or they might be very prolific shoplifters. Our team work with probation team, and we put in enhanced support, enhanced monitoring. So sometimes people wearing, if they're committing offences at night, we might have a tag on them for curfew. So some of that is part of sentencing through the criminal justice system, but some of that is about how we also manage offenders as well, and some work around geotagging. So and of course our neighbourhood officers work on those those repeat offenders, repeat victims, repeat locations. So if people are repeatedly offending, our PCSOs, our neighbourhood teams out and about, know who they are, because Alyssa's team put the intelligence into our briefings. So when patrol officers, neighbourhood officers are coming on duty, they know who the prolific offenders are, who are repeat offenders, so they can target them. And hopefully, and that's where I mentioned earlier on around coming in and using dispersal notices or using stop search powers. We've got the information intelligence in order to then target those individuals to try and prevent the crime in the first place, and look at other offences, like going equipped, for argument's sake, if they've got tools on them, in relation to obviously commit the offence of theft, cutting tags and things off, etc.
Sure. Thank you for that, Mark. The next question is from Nigel Calachan. Violence to shop staff has recently been in the news. What are the current figures for such crimes in Dorset? I'm looking to you, Mark, for that one.
Yeah, and I haven't got the exact figures to note in terms of the violence aspect of in those offences. So what I can say is that the data is available to us when crimes are reported, because obviously the offence of assault, if violence is used, is a greater offence than the actual theft. So in those cases where there's an offence, a high, so is a robbery, and crime definitions are complex, and I'm not going to go to them. I can't do them justice in this meeting, but obviously we look at the offences of robbery, we look at the offence of assault, theft from person, and then the actual theft. So where there's an offence where an assault takes place, obviously that assault takes a significant sort of primary part of the investigation that will take place. Those cases are flagged, so we can pull the data out. If someone's being assaulted in the act of committing a theft, and that comes through to 999, and that's my advice. If people are in the middle of a theft, shoplifting taking place, and there's violence being used, people need to use 999, and then obviously that will have the appropriate response to hers. Sometimes we get reported afterwards, so there's been a bit of a tussle, and there's some reporting, and they go through. I wouldn't want to go into the finer details, but I wouldn't, and Alyssa, you might be able to help with this, but it's not something we're seeing on an everyday basis where we've got violent people attacking staff. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why we encourage members of staff not to get involved. That's often the company's policy as well, because actually their safety is paramount, making sure that actually if they're going to steal something, we'd rather investigate the theft than investigating people who've been seriously injured or assaulted at work, because people don't go to work to be assaulted, do they? Let's face it, from that perspective. But I don't know, Alyssa, you're more into the details, some of the IRC jobs that come through. Is there anything you want to add around that violence piece?
No, I'd agree with what you've said. We're not seeing an uptick particularly, and we support that advice that we'd rather deal with a shoplifting than an assault.
Absolutely. Thank you for that from both of you. Can I ask a subsequent question then, Alyssa? Can you give us a sense of kind of the quantum? So if there's 100 shoplifting offences, what proportion would you see which would include an assault? I'm just trying to get my head around that. You said you've not seen an uptick, but what are we looking at here?
Gosh, right. I'm having to think about what I'm seeing. So 100 shoplifts, maybe 3% would involve an assault.
Okay, right. I'm not going to hang you out on a specific number, but what we're saying is it's a very small number compared to the overall situation, and it's dealt with as we talked about earlier. Mark, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think what I can add. So interesting with the question around Sherborne today. I looked at over a month period, or and then a bit wider overall the shopliftings, over a period of time. I dip checked into many of them, and I wasn't seeing, obviously there's a fear there of staff, but I wasn't seeing that there's violence being used and people being assaulted in those circumstances. And of course, if we do have an increase of violence being used in shoplifting, that becomes an MO of a certain a shoplifter or in a geographical location. Our intelligence monitoring and Alyssa's team start to pick that up. So actually, we would see if there's a repeat offender using violence, we'd see that as a higher priority and look at ensuring more resource go into trying to identify that offender and prevent them, because they pose a higher risk to the public under those circumstances. And all our intelligence systems, support that in terms of identifying any of those offenders.
Thank you both for that. We'll move on to the next question. So this is from Aaron Coleman. Thank you. With some supermarket without security officers and staff told not to approach thieves leading up to Christmas, most supermarkets will be target. What is your advice for staff in supermarkets? Mark.
So I think we've sort of covered some of this off already. So I think the first thing is follow your organisation's policy. I think that's the key thing. If a theft is taking place there and then, and you're seeing it, you need to contact us. If there's a theft, and that's either through the 999 or the 101, particularly violence and high value, we will prioritise your call based on other things that's going on across Dorset at the time. I think the other thing is that self awareness of prevention about where you place goods, and many organisations, businesses now are well aware of this, about where do you place those high value goods that are going to get stolen, those tagged items. And I know there's lots of work that go on by organisations, but be aware of that. I've also seen actually many stores increase their security at times of peak demand. So not name particular stores, but engagement we have with them, where your staff feel at risk, that's been raised up. We've engaged as well, and that's resulted in enhanced security at times on certain places. And I think the other thing for me, just around the Christmas side of things, we are enhancing our resources, so particularly in our town centre areas, to ensure that we have got increased resources available to us, and something that the Police and Crime Commissioner is also supporting with us. So particularly in places like Bournemouth, the festive markets, as one example, that's a significantly crowded place, so we enhance our resourcing into there. The BCP Commander, Chief Superintendent Dixie's been focusing very heavily on the Bournemouth town centre because of the increase in shoplifting we've had there in offenders. So what we do as a force is, during this festive period and understand the increase in risk, we're deploying our neighbourhood teams, not just in Bournemouth, across the whole of the county, where we've got hotspot areas of potential criminality or increased criminality, and to make sure through neighbourhood and through our patrol plans that wherever we can, we enhance resourcing into those areas. It is a challenge at times because of the demand that we have, but that's our endeavour to ensure that we can give high visibility policing to try and have the deterrent effect.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Alyssa, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Not on that one.
In that case, we'll go on and see what the next one is. Thomas Anderson asks, what can businesses do to stop this crime from happening? So I'm gonna pass that to you first, Mark, and then Alyssa, from her perspective as well. I mean, it is about collaboration and partnership. That is what will sort this in the end, between the businesses and the police. But over to you, Mark, for specifics.
Yeah, so absolutely, it is about collaboration, partnership. So I think there's a number of things. One, crime prevention is the key thing, and there's lots of information on the internet in relation to crime prevention. We'll see. We've got a link that Alyssa's got. We'll see if we can try and get that shared on the other screen somehow. But we can always put that in any news release or social media updates afterwards about how businesses can help themselves around it. So the National Business Crime Centre. I think it goes back to the previous answer. I think some of it is about being aware of what items are being stolen and what security you can put around it to try and try to mitigate against it, try and prevent that, to make it more difficult for people. I appreciate that's limited because at the end of the day, business is trying to, it's a business, you want to sell your products, etc., and for those people who want to purchase them. But I think I do see a lot of effort going in from businesses to try and do that. I think the other aspect is, to stop the crime happening is we need that information intelligence. We need you to report, as Alyssa's already referred to and I've referred to. The only way we can stop the prolific offenders is by really targeting, identifying them and targeting them and taking them through the criminal justice system or putting diversion in. That community intelligence is key again. Things like if you've got, like I said, we're very lucky not to have the significant organised criminality around shoplifting, but if we're getting those crimes, information intelligence on who's doing them, etc., and that can be through our 101, through our internet access to Dorset Police, but also Crime Stoppers as well, from that perspective. But I think the biggest thing, as the Commissioner said, is collaboration. Let's work together collaboratively, both locally, regionally and nationally, on how we can tackle the criminality and make where we live, where our businesses thrive, make it a toxic environment for people who want to commit crime, and actually upstanding and people making sure that we're really highlighting the problem, and we together we'll try and crack it. Alyssa.
Thank you, sir. So I've just shared the National Business Crime Centre, which is a really useful resources for businesses to learn and kind of improve their measures when it comes to shoplifting.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. We'll see what we've got next. Susie Lee Bloss, is the monetary shoplifting limit a myth? Oh, I'm so pleased that you asked that question. Do the police care about small instances of shoplifting? So I'll do it the other way around this time. We'll go to Alyssa first, and then I'll come to Mark.
I've heard this myth only this week. Someone said to me that if it's under £75, the police won't do anything. Absolutely incorrect. So we do care. We care very much. We know that shoplifting has a massive impact on businesses. We want every opportunity to deal with this, hence why I keep asking about reporting. But also, if it's low amounts, it might be showing something different. There might be more of a safeguarding need that we need to be cognizant of. So, yes, we care, and yes, it matters, is my answer.
Excellent. Mark, do you want to add anything?
I think that often the small incidents as well, so I echo what Alyssa said, but actually there's a big difference as well in terms of the vulnerability of the business owner as well. So absolutely, there's no monetary myth to it. There is in relation to charging in the criminal justice system, in terms of maybe the sentencing and various things, but that's not for us to worry about. Our job is to investigate and take them through the system, managing the safeguarding issues. But we don't underestimate. There used to be that myth about a local little corner shops had a couple of Mars bars stolen, but actually that's their profit. That's really impacting for small businesses. It's impacted for any business, and so absolutely, it's definitely a myth and one that we want to dispel.
Thank you, and thank you. You gave the same example as I was going to give. 4 bottles of whiskey's nicked on, one a week. That matters to a small business as a corner shop. So absolutely. We'll go on to the next one. Sean Aston, can I ask what you are doing about begging in Winton High Street? We need more police on the high street. Being vulnerable, it's awful. Thank you very much indeed for that question. So this is related to our high streets. It's not quite shoplifting, but nevertheless, we're going to answer it. What are we doing about the situation of begging? It's specific about Winton. So I'll come to Mark, I think, rather than Alyssa on this one.
Yeah, so obviously in terms of, we work hand in hand with the local authority, so BCP, local authority, on those that are living on the streets, the homelessness, and those committing any offences. So sometimes, we have aggressive begging as well in terms of how people function. So there's quite a comprehensive operation that takes place around the homelessness, and that does extend out into the wider BCP across the whole of Dorset, to be honest with you, in terms of the local authority response to those people. So some work's done with the voluntary sector as well, to identify the reasons why individuals are begging, to try and get people off the street, get them away from homelessness, and again understand, is it addiction, is it by choice, have they been made homeless, what are the reasons, and therefore get them off the streets. Where there is that aggressive begging taking place, where we've got this unlawful activity, so potentially public order, antisocial behaviour, etc., then we will deal robustly with those circumstances and those individuals. And that is like things, working with the local authority, we take basically civil orders out on people. If there's so many chances that they have and all the support, but it gets to a point, and then we working with the local authority to take orders out on them to stop that aggressive begging and work. It is a challenge, but actually it's something the Commissioner regularly challenges the local authority and the force on, in terms of the operations delivered, to make sure that we're doing all we can. And of course, particularly much of the begging is linked to homelessness, and there's now the work that's been done through the Princess of Wales and the homeless charities that's taking place to try and get rid of these issues.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for that, Mark. I think we've got another question. Okay, so this is an ask from Mark Groom. Shoplifters go into stores, clear shelves, fill trolleys and leave. Why is this classed as shoplifting and not burglary? So I'd like you to do 2 things, please. I'd like you to talk about, because that sounds very much like the organised crime situation. So I'd like you to just talk to that, Mark. But also, I think, Alyssa, the definition and what fits where, probably I'll come to you about that one, if I may. So Mark, first of all, about the bit about clearing the shelves, filling trolleys and all the rest of it, because we have seen some terrible things, but not in Dorset from that perspective, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So that filling trolleys and shelves, leaving is definitely linked to that organised criminality, where you get criminal groups, serious organised crime, who go around different areas, clear shelves, and then leave from that perspective. Obviously, it's shoplifting on a larger scale from that perspective. We are very lucky in Dorset that we see very small numbers of these, and I know it's something Alyssa's team watch for really closely. And if we do get any cases, we flag them and obviously investigate them. That's where the Opal team come in, and the Regional Organised Crime Unit. So we work really closely with our Organised Crime Unit colleagues and Opal to understand where these offences are taking place. So it may well be offences are taken on those, but another force area or another regional organised crime unit is investigating them, and we share all the evidence with them to build a bigger case somewhere else. But I am pleased, but we're not complacent. I think that's important. We are not complacent on those offences taking place in Dorset from that perspective. Alyssa, I'm happy to explain the burglary and versus shoplifting if you wish, but I'm happy for you to do it as well.
Thank you, sir. So the crux of it is burglary is entering as a trespasser, whereas shoplifting is appropriating goods with the intention to permanently deprive. So it's slightly different. It just doesn't fulfil the points to prove of burglary, but it does fulfil the points to prove of theft. So that's why it's shoplift, if that assists.
Okay. Well, that's kind of excellent. I don't have any more questions coming in from the public at this moment in time. What would be your message, Mark, to the public around shoplifting? I'm going to ask you, Alyssa, the same thing.
Alyssa and I probably are going to answer the same answer, probably. But so I think my message to the public is we have seen an increase in reporting of shoplifting, and I'm really grateful for it, because actually I think at one point, being honest, I think the public, didn't feel anything was happening, and therefore probably wasn't reporting offences to us. And I'm really pleased. I'm never pleased that crime's going up, but actually, I think we're starting to build the trust and confidence of our business communities and those impacted by this, and that's why we're starting to see a slight, an increase in offences being reported. That's a positive thing, so that we can really drive up the investigations, and we can deal with these offenders around things. So that's my first thing. Is there's a reason we're asking you to report. It's not just to investigate. It's so we understand the scale of the problem, because what that scale of that problem then does is links into the community safety partnership and partners and the wider feeling of safety in our towns as well. So while shoplifting is one offence, we take all that information to understand how safe and look at other offences that might take place. So how safe it feels in areas for people. So it's not just about shoplifting; it's the bigger picture around criminality for us. I think my other thing is if you know who's committing these offences, the community know. My biggest thing is please report it. Please tell us, because it will help us in our investigations, so we can put a name to a face if we've got CCTV. That information from the community is really, really important for us. And I know I keep repeating that. And if community members feel concerned, they think, well, I'm worried about naming people. Crime Stoppers and our intelligence reporting is anonymous. You don't have to provide your details, but that bit of intelligence could be enough, just for one, to safeguard a child maybe who's committing offences, or more prolific offenders who we need to take off the streets and prevent those offences from. So they're my probably two key things, all links to trust and confidence. Please, we want to help. We want to work together in order to tackle the criminality on our streets and make people feel safe as well. Alyssa.
Thank you, sir. So my message would be, we know that shoplifting is corrosive and it makes people feel unsafe. We take it seriously, and we would like you to report to us, give us the opportunity to deal with this.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you for coming and basically saying what's happening this evening. I'd like to say a couple of other things just before we go. One is about the root causes. For example, we know that 70% of shoplifting, according to one study, was linked to substance abuse and alcohol. There's a lot of work going on around that, so that's not strictly for this evening, but there is, both from the point of view of treatment and indeed prevention, in order to try and stop people getting into the substances in the first place. I think from my perspective, I'm very grateful to all the partners who have been working with us over the last 3.5 years since we started up the Dorset Safer Business Partnership. I'm really grateful to the retail chains, because we've just started a really good discussion with them about policies and procedures and what more we can do together. I'm grateful for Dorset Police and the way that they're gripping the shoplifting threat to our county. And I just like to endorse the one thing which I think has run as a thread through this evening, which is please report, because if you report, then something will get done in order to address it. And that leaves me just to say to everybody, thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you for joining us, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas when you get there. Thank you very much indeed.